Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Uh, just to prove, this is my membership badge. I still am one of you. I'm sorry I can't be there in Barcelona, but there are certain reasons, personal reasons that forced me to stay here. I love to come to the ESUG conference. That's normally my week that I can geek off and just do some things that I really like to do. But there are things that we have to deal with. How many of you remember back in April this small volcano up in Iceland that nobody could pronounce the name, but which in the course of a couple of days set transportation in Europe back 100 years? Yeah. It affected a lot of us. I was lucky that I was home at that time. I wasn't able to get to a client, but I have a number of friends who were stuck someplace where they really didn't want to be. I happen to know of an airplane pilot who was stuck someplace and missed his own wedding, which I don't know how that turned out, if he ever did get married to the same woman or not, but this is indicative of the situation we're in, of the world we have things that we have to respond to, but things that we can't influence, right? There's a lack of predictability in what's happening in the world, but we have to deal with it, otherwise we'll be swept out of the market. And with the clients that I've been working with the past couple of years, working with a company like Nokia after the iPhone came on the market is a great example of that. And what we need is to find new ways to deal with the situation, with the competition, with the speed of the competition, and find out how to adapt things as quickly as possible. So the old Greek philosopher Heraclitus once said that change is the only constant, that things are constantly changing, right? And what we've been looking for with agile processes is a way to find out how to adapt to that change, how to accept it, how to embrace the change, and find out essentially how to make decisions at the right time, asking when is the right time to make a decision about something, and then try to optimize that. So for many things, we'll be smarter tomorrow than we are today, which means that if we can avoid making a decision until tomorrow, the decision is probably going to be a smarter one. The question is, how long can we wait, right? Oftentimes when I have to deal with these decisions in the course of my work, I think back to Neil Ross. Is Neil there this year? Hi, Neil. You once said a great quote. Said static typing is the worst case of premature optimization. Right? And there are some other cases that we have when we deal in business with premature optimization, with trying to make decisions too far in advance, putting too much effort in to try and decide things where the return on investment for that effort just isn't worth it. Right? So in order to deal with that, I've worked a lot with the project management framework that's called Scrum. Scrum is a very simple framework. It's a great tool also for diagnosing what's wrong with your company. And Scrum in itself has nothing at all to do with software development. It doesn't tell you what to build. So if your requirements analysis, your requirements gathering is not good, with Scrum, you're guaranteed to build the wrong thing, and the market will punish you for it. On the other side, Scrum doesn't tell you how to build it. It's domain agnostic. It has nothing to do with software development. So if you're building software and your development practices aren't good, with Scrum, you're guaranteed to build crappy software. It's just with Scrum, we hope that you'll recognize it first before the market sees it and punishes you for it. What Scrum does is it's between those two. It's between the what we build and how we build it. And there's a big chunk of space in here talking about when do we build what. When do we build what in a certain type of situation, right? Now, the situations that I've used Scrum for in very successfully have been things like organizing museum exhibitions, organizing rock concerts, organizing marketing, organizing architectural projects. And it's interesting to see, what do all these type of projects have in common. Actually, I even organized my wedding using Scrum. We delivered on time and on budget, and I'm still happily married. Actually, I helped Tim and Madalena organize their wedding using Scrum. That you're still happily married, right, Tim? Thank you. Good to know. So, what do all these types of projects have in common? Well, they're something that we call a socially complex domain. Now, what is a socially complex domain and what makes it so special? Make it simple, socially complex domains are ones that have a high degree of uncertainty or rapid change or emergence along three vectors. The first vector is, what are we going to build, right? Your requirements. The second is, how are we going to build it? What are the tools that we use for this? And the third is the people. Who's going to build it? These are the three factors that we have to deal with. The problem with what are we going to build, we deal with still with many companies with a classical process that even when they're developing software using an agile method, their requirements gathering process is still an old-fashioned waterfall method where your customers get one chance to tell you everything they want, and if they don't get it right the first time, well, there's a problem there because these change requests never seem to work. Right? And with the technology, what are you going to build it with? That's something that's also constantly changing. And the best, or the worst, or the most interesting problem is people. How do you get people? How do you get to predict their behavior? Right? How do you get to plan the way that people work? And even more interesting, how do you get a group of people to become a team? Now, many of us think that all you need to do is get a group, get the best people together, and they're going to be a fantastic team, right? So let's take a look at the Italian football national team in the World Cup and how well they did. Sorry, I don't want to insult any Italians in the room, but I used to make that joke with the Swiss national team, but then we went and beat Spain. Yes. But these are the things that we have to deal with, right? So what are these socially complex domains? Well, in order to tell you, to show you, it's best to use an example. Let me show you this. If you see this, this is a light, and this is I'm going to turn it on. Okay, you see it turn on? Good. I will hit the switch again, and I'll turn it off. Now I'm going to hit the switch again, and it's on again. Okay, listen up. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to hit the switch again. How many of you know what is going to happen? Please raise your hands. If you can. Okay. Good. I just turned it. Did that happen what you expected to happen? Yeah. Okay, congratulations. This is the most important lesson. You can now predict the future. Right? Think about it. For this little bit of reality, you can now predict the future. And being able to predict the future is an advantage. Right? So you know in a certain situation, if you need something, if you want something to happen, you know what to do. This is what we call an ordered system. Right? Ordered system has causality, has a cause and effect. You do something once, you see something happen, you do it again, you expect exactly the same thing to happen. Right? Very simple. The problem with people, or the problem with complex systems is that they also have this type of causality, but it works a bit differently. So let me try to explain the type of causality of a complex system and then go into a little bit more detail about that and why this is a problem for us. I have a really good friend of mine, my friend Michael, Tim, you know him. He's a professor for bioinformatics in Basel at the university. We work a lot together. I've been coaching his doctoral students using Scrum for the doctoral projects. And Michael's a really great guy. But one thing he does very well is he really knows how to organize parties. So the parties he's organized have been some of the best I've ever been to. You know, if I can even remember them sometimes, they've been so good. So I have to organize a party in the next couple of weeks. So I sat down with him last week and started talking with him about, well, what makes a good party? What's his secret? And so we talked about things about, you know, the people you invite and the music you play and the food and drink. And I said, well, if it's that easy, I still don't understand. Can you help me organize my party? So Michael says to me, yes, Joseph, if you want your party to be a success, first thing you have to do, the people, you have to invite my friends. That, I wasn't really happy about that, but I had to make a decision. Do I want a successful party, or do I want to invite my own friends? Because I know with his friends it's going to be a success, but I actually wanted to invite my own friends. So I was sad about that, but he gave me a suggestion. Said, look, actually we can start saving you money. Don't need a DJ, because I had the DJ at my last party write down all the songs that he played, because we know that it was all these songs played in this order that was part of making the party a success. So I can give you a playlist for your iPod, and all you have to do is hook your iPod on your stereo and push start and lock it away so that nobody fools around with it. Because we know that inviting these people and having this music played is what makes your party a success. And oh yes, since this is Switzerland, we're very precise on this. We have watches, and everybody who comes in gets a piece of paper with exact timings on it, telling them exactly when to eat and drink, and when to talk with other people. So how many of you think that this party, if I organize it like this, will be a success? Raise your hands. No takers. Now the question is, why won't it be a success? This is a question that it's sort of obvious, right? Or it's intuitive, it's a gut feeling, but there's no way to express it scientifically. Well, there is. There's an expression we use for this, and we call it retrospective coherence. Retrospective coherence is a phenomenon of complex systems that says that as a complex system emerges, which means as your party goes on, the causality, so the reason for your party becoming a success, also emerges, so that when you get there at the end and you have a success, you know how you got there. But do exactly the same thing again, you're pretty much guaranteed not to get to the same place. Wow. Think about this. This has wide-reaching consequences. Understanding this is one of the most key things to understanding how modern projects work and why agile methods like Scrum, like extreme programming, are the best way of dealing with them, and why methods like waterfall will never work in this domain. Okay? So, if we take a look at this party again, Michael said, okay, it's the people. Now, it wasn't really the people. Yes and no. Well, what Michael did to make his party a success, the first thing he did is he set up some boundaries. His first boundary was, his bedroom's off limits. He always locks away his single malt collection so that nobody can get to it. Right? Sets up some boundaries. And then what else he sets up are some things that people like, some things that people are attracted to. Food and drink, music, maybe big television if the World Cup is on. These are called attractors. To see the most typical example of an attractor, has anybody been to a party? No. Good. So at least a couple. Why do people always congregate in the kitchen? Ever think about that? Kitchen is an attractor. It provides us with food and drink, a couple things very low on Maslow's needs scale. It provides us with a controlled space that's small enough that we can come into contact with other people. So you set up attractors, and then you watch patterns emerge around these attractors. You watch the way people move around these attractors, and if the patterns tend to be good, then you try to amplify them. If the patterns are bad, then you try to disrupt them as soon as possible. So what makes the party a success was the fact that Michael set up the boundaries, set the attractors, and then observed the patterns. He was constantly watching the people. He was watching how are people getting along. If people are fighting, he'll break up the fight. If he sees somebody sitting alone in a corner, doesn't know anybody, not talking to somebody, he'll come over and talk to that person, take him, introduce him to other people, and he's constantly making sure that all the people who are there are happy or comfortable. Now, at the end, you can say, yes, the party was a success and those people were there. But was the party a success because just these people were there? Or would the party be a success if other people were there? What we tend to confuse at the end, what we think are the factors for success are quite often just artifacts, just the list of people who are at the party, whereas it's the process that's ensuring the success. The same thing with the music, right? You know, every DJ will watch who's on the dance floor. If nobody's dancing, I'll put on something maybe a bit more rocky stuff. And if it's 5 o'clock in the morning and the headbangers are pogoing to the Clash and the neighbors are complaining, then he might put something on that's a little bit softer. And at the end, you can say, yes, the party was a success and played these pieces. But is the causality there? Would it have been a success if we maybe played some other pieces? Right? Once again, confuse what you see at the end. It's a list of artifacts with the process, which is what ensured that the party would be a success. And once again, with the food and drink, it's the same thing. Michael was constantly taking a look, watching, is there enough to eat? Is there enough to drink? And if there wasn't, maybe he'd bring some more food, maybe he'd get some more beer. And at the end of the party, you could say, yes, the party was a success, and so many bottles of beer, or so many cases of beer and wine and cava and limoncello and whatever were drank. But would it have been a success if they had something else to drink? We don't know. Once again, don't confuse the static artifacts at the end with the process. The process is what's important. The process is what made the party a success. And this is something that we notice in agile processes like Scrum, is that you have to make a conscious decision. What do you want? Do you want to implement your initial feature set, or do you want to have a successful product? Because the two will never be the same. Okay, granted, I'll give that a little exclamation, a little star, and say, with the exception of something you can write in a 3-line shell script. But for any project that goes over 1 or 2 months, there will be changes in the requirements, there will be changes in the technology, and there will be changes in the people working on it. And these are the things that we have to deal with. So, what does retrospective coherence mean? It means that if we can't predict the future, we're going to have to work differently, right? One of the things that I've done lately in my courses is I get a volunteer and ask them to walk across the room. I put some chairs in their way and ask them to walk across the room and walk out the door, which they normally do very successfully. And then I blindfold them and tell them there's broken glass on the floor, and then walk out the door. And they tend to walk very differently if they can't see where they're. The problem that we're dealing with is that we can't see where we're going. We can't predict changes in the marketplace. We can't predict what our competitors are going to do. But we have to, like volcano, it affects us. We have to react to it, otherwise we'll be out of the market, but you can't influence it. You can only react to it. This is one of the big challenges that we have. Another challenge, another thing that's interesting about retrospective coherence is the fact that you are all experts. Okay? Think about it. You're all experts. What does it mean to be an expert? What it means to be an expert is that you know how to deal with certain situations. You know, if you have this problem, you do this. If you have another problem, you do that. In this case, you do this. And in another case, you do that. And pretty soon, we're back to turning the light on and off. because we have an ordered system. But it doesn't work like that. Only know afterwards in a complex system whether it was a success or not. So how are you going to go about working to ensure success if you only know afterwards? Well, there's a couple ways of doing this. When I teach Scrum, when I work with Scrum, I have 3 basic rules and 3 basic questions I ask. The first basic rule is this: we don't make mistakes, we learn. Many of the problems that we have are based on the fact that we were punished for making mistakes in the past. All right? And think about it. If we're punished for making mistakes, there are a lot of things we would never do, like learn to ride a bicycle. If you learn to ride a bicycle and the first time you tried without your training wheels and you fell on the ground and your father came and yelled at you and said, "You'll never get it right," how many of us would be riding bicycles? Did you ever think how and why babies learn to walk? Babies learn to walk because no one doubts that it's possible, and because they get positive feedback for every step they take, right? Did you ever see a mother with a little kid? The kid takes his first couple of steps, falls on the floor, and the mother comes and says, "No, hey, stay down on the floor. Cats and dogs like it down there." No, what happens is, picks the kid up again, holds it by the hands. It looks like bungee jump to begin, right? And then lets the kid take a couple steps. The kid falls on the floor, picks it up again, lets it walk some more. And what the mother's really hoping is that the kid can walk so many steps that she can get a mobile phone and take pictures and spam all the relatives with the pictures of the kid walking. That's what it is. Every time the kid takes steps, gets positive feedback, and nobody doubts that it's possible. Nobody comes and tells the little kid when it falls on the ground, says, "Look, stay down there, otherwise you're going to have problems with your back later." Right? Don't make mistakes. We learn. Give you another example. Imagine that your boss comes in and tells you, he throws you a specifications document on your desk, says, "Take a look at this. I'll be back in a couple hours. Tell me how long you need to implement this." You take a look at it and say, "Okay, I can probably get this done in a week." And then 2 hours later, the boss comes back in and asks you, "Okay, did you take a look at it? How much time do you need?" Come on, how much time do you tell the boss? 2 weeks. 3 weeks, maybe. This is our inside joke. But why do we do this inside joke? Because we know that we will be punished for making a mistake. If we don't get it right, we're going to be the ones that have to work after hours. We're going to be the ones that have to work on the weekend. But it's only, remember, estimates are retrospectively coherent. You only know in the end how long you actually needed. And then it's not an estimate anymore. All right? One thing we've done I just spent the last 7 months working as interim CTO at a big online auction house. And one of the things we did was we got away from using the term estimate. Anything that's further out than maybe 2 to 3 months to be implemented now becomes a forecast. Think about it. I can tell you that tonight it's going to get dark. With 100% sure about that. I'll tell you that tomorrow morning it's going to get lighter. 100% sure about that. Not quite sure whether the sun's going to shine or something. But I will tell you that on February 23rd, the sun will be shining and it will be 8.5 degrees Celsius. Do you believe that? All right. It's a forecast. And the interesting thing is that regardless of how much money, how many resources, how much supercomputing power I throw at it, this forecast will get better. It'll get better the closer I get to February 23rd. There are certain things that I can generally say that it's probably going to be colder in February than it's going to be in July. But just realizing this, right? The problem is with retrospective coherence, that if we only know afterwards, no, we have no fail-safe techniques. So what we need to do is we need to create a safe fail environment. We need to create a place where we're able to try things out, to get feedback as quick as possible without being punished for it. And getting feedback as quick as possible. This is one of the ideas that started the Agile movement, and this is something that really came from Smalltalk, is the fact that you can get feedback on what you're doing a lot quicker than if you have a compile link cycle. And when you start doing things like unit testing, you get that feedback loop even quicker, right? It's like, once again, the example of having somebody walk across a room with a blindfold on. What you're trying to do is get feedback as quickly as possible whether you're going in the right direction or not. And if you are, go more in the same direction. If not, go in a different direction. Correct that and don't waste too much. Another one of the basic rules is whoever has the risk makes the decisions. Think about that. Go back to the example of you estimating. The boss asks you how long you need to do something, and you know it's a week, so you tell him 2 weeks. Why do you tell him 2 weeks? Because you know he's going to come in and say, oh, actually, no, that's too long. You have 1 week's time to do it, right? So whoever has the risk makes a decision. Who's carrying the risk of having to work late or work on weekends? You are. Who made the decision about how long to implement? Someone else did. Many problems occur here when you don't separate the business or the customer side from the technical side. Right? Developers own their estimates. Business people own the priorities. And you have to make that very clear. And that gets really tough when you're working in technical fields where your business people, the product owners and stuff, are technical people who are not only telling you how long you have to do it, but they're also trying to tell you how to do it. So a couple of the other techniques that we use to get around with retrospective coherence. One of the questions I always ask, this is my first question, is when do you want to know you have a problem? After 2 weeks in a 6-month project? Or after 2 years in a 6-month project? There's a version of this for big companies. The big company version just leaves out the word when and asks the question, do you want to know you have a problem? Because most of them don't. Obviously, the sooner you know, the better. The more often you get feedback, the shorter your feedback loop is, the more flexible you are, the more alternatives you are, and the less it costs you to make a change. Right? So once again, this is a place where it's obvious this idea came from Smalltalk, where you get that feedback loop so quickly. Right? It's different when you know, I find it interesting that XP started as a process with rapid feedback loops, getting away from working in COBOL or things like that, where you had overnight compile jobs and stuff. And we said there's this old curve of something costing $1 if you catch a mistake during requirements, and $10 during analysis, and $100 during design and stuff. That this changes. It becomes essentially flat when you're using modern technologies. That we're getting away from that, but building things in Java that take days to compile. Right? And this is a place where I still think that dynamic languages like Smalltalk really still have a special place and really have an advantage. I don't need to say this to you. I'm preaching to the choir. But I practice it because this is what I tell other people all the time anyway. They just have a problem listening to it. Another question that is always good to ask, and this is one of the first things I learned from Kent Beck, is how much are you prepared to throw away? How much are you prepared to throw away in your analysis, in your design, requirements, in estimating and stuff? If you don't know, if you can't predict the future and you don't know what the market is going to do and you don't know what your competitors are going to do, how much are you going to invest? I deal with clients whose finance departments want serious estimates for stuff a year and a half in advance. And they would actually prefer to throw the money at that than at something else. And this is the reason we started using the idea of a forecast, making it obvious that for anything that's that far out, it's not going to get any better if you apply more manpower and more resources to it. And what I would prefer my developers to do, I prefer to spend the money and the effort making sure that the company's still there and successful in a year and a half. And you do that by delivering right now, not just at first in a couple of years. So, thinking back, a lot of these ideas came from small talk, and I still think there's that implemented in small talk. I think that that Java has made some major steps forward towards becoming a legacy language, and looking at the Java development environments, they've done some very good things. A lot of the interesting add-ons or plugins to tools like Eclipse and stuff have been written by small talkers or former small talkers, but we still have a competitive advantage in the language we're using, and I think we should be aware of that. I think we should be aware of that. The language that we use provides us with the advantage of getting the most rapid feedback of any other language that's still currently on the market. Think about that, take that, and use that to your competitive advantage. Because in the end, you don't get a gold star when you do all 12 XP practices. You don't get a gold star when you do these Scrum meetings. Now, come on. Going to meetings makes you agile like going to a garage makes you a car. All right? Your gold star by doing that. You get that gold star by kicking the shit out of your competition. That's the bottom line. Okay, for right now, I think that's all that I have to say for myself. I would really like to hear from you if you have any input or any questions about this. It's a bit difficult to engage in dialogue over a couple thousand kilometers, but let's give it a try. Yes, it is. I can hear you. Wow. It is early. I'm listening. I still haven't heard any question. Okay, about retrospectives. This is okay. This is interesting. I once gave this talk or a similar talk, and somebody said, "Oh yes, retrospective coherence. Things only become clear during the retrospective." That's not quite what it is. Um, I would have to say that Tim could probably give you more and better answers about retrospectives than I could. He's one of the people who is really involved in the retrospective movement. But what we need in a process like this, right? My first rule was don't make mistakes. We learn. It's only a mistake if you don't learn from it, and you only learn if you change your behavior because of what you learned. So at least in the Scrum process, what we do is we set aside time at the end of every iteration just to stop and say, what did we learn? And what are we going to change because of this? This is a cycle that we call apply, inspect, and adapt. And the sense of this is that we need time to stop and learn from things. And if you're only doing postmortems, if you're only doing things at the end of a project, that's much too late. That means your feedback loop is too big for you to gain much knowledge on it. Because the corrections you're going to do are then probably going to be quite big ones, and you're probably going to be doing them on another project which will have different set of problems than the one that you're actually working on. So do retrospectives at the end of every iteration, just simple ones. You need maybe half an hour to do them at the end of a 1 or 2 week iteration, but keep doing that. Things do become clear then, but this is a point of time where you have to stop and take a look and say, are we going in the right direction? What did we learn? What are we going to change for that? To give you an example from a totally different domain, Tim's wife, Madalena, used to work on the Eurostar, and they would have a mini retrospective every day. At the end of work, they would stop and just get together and discuss what happened to that during that day. Did things pop up? What do they need to change? What can they learn from that? The more often you do it, the tighter your feedback loops are, the better your process is going to be. Doing a retrospective once an iteration is the goal. I think you should be doing looking at things introspectively more often than that. The idea of a daily stand-up or a daily scrum, many people get this wrong. Many people think this is just a reporting meeting. The idea for a daily scrum or a stand-up meeting is it's a planning meeting. It's not a reporting meeting. It's a planning meeting where the team plans how to win the game that day. And that's a totally different meeting than people reporting to a scrum master, to a customer, to a product owner about what they're doing. Because once this planning aspect comes in, the learning experience will automatically come into that. And I take that even further. I use a method I invented called the Quattro Stagioni method, which is where I break the day down into 4 quarters. From the beginning of the day up to the coffee break, and then up to lunch, and then up to tea time in the afternoon. And using this not only as a unit of estimation, but also as a unit of time, concentration, a cycle of work. What happens is that you start getting all the developers together every 90 minutes. And what they start doing, we're human. We tend to talk about problems. Which type of news spreads quickest, good news or bad news? Right? What will come up in these discussions are the problems, the things you have to address. And you get feedback loops and you address problems earlier, and no small problem has the time to become a big problem. So yes, I think retrospectives, learning experiences are essential. They're key. If you're not doing them, you're losing a lot. This is one of the problems I have with processes like Kanban that have no time reserved for learning experiences. They say, yes, continuous learning, but we're still trying to pack as much work as possible then into every day. And getting work done is more important than actually learning and learning how to do it better. I hope that answers your question. Ah. Hmm. Hmm. Um, okay, the question was about what I call the 3 core practices of XP, which are test-driven development, refactoring, and pair programming. These are all things which are once again defined in order to give small feedback loops, right? Um, Pair programming is the one that's often the most difficult to implement. There's, people make these idiotic calculations that, well, if you have two people working separately, or if you have two people working in a pair, you'll only be going half as fast, right? Which is based on a stupid assumption that a person working alone is working at 100%. This is not the case. Look at anybody doing sports, gets together with a buddy to go work out together, and how much more intense they work out, and how lazy you tend to be working by yourself. The calculation just doesn't work, and there's over a decade of information and research onto the productiveness of pair programming. It is a challenge, especially if people, eat garlic pizza for lunch, or if people have, less than optimal personal hygiene and things like that. But on the other side, one of the problems with pair programming is, to quote Francois Truffaut, the French film director, he once said that no one in their right mind would think of doing brain surgery without studying for years and years and years. But there are things that everybody thinks that they're born as experts in. Sex and talking about films. I think pair programming belongs to this group. I think everybody thinks they're born as experts in pair programming. And this is wrong. I have a friend of mine who's doing her doctoral dissertation at the Open University on this, on the psychology of pair programming, realizing that it's not an easy thing to do. You have to learn how to do it. And yes, there are people you can pair program with better. There are people you can pair program with less good. And I think understanding this fact that, once again, it's a people problem. It's a people issue. And this is what gets us into socially complex domains, right? Not only the requirements, not only the technology, but the fact that we're dealing with people. If you're interested to learn more about that, I can put you in contact with my friend at the Open University. She's been doing some really interesting research, filming pairs, doing interviews with them, doing pair therapy sessions with them, figuring out how to get people to learn how to pair program better. There's another hand.
There was a session on Monday which was launched by Jason Ayers about wolf pack programming, and the idea was to have a couple of people, maybe 6, 8, share the same image through web velocity. What do you think of this approach?
Okay, there was a session on Monday from Jason Ayers about a new technique having multiple people sharing the same image. I'm sorry, I was in the hospital on Monday. I didn't get a chance to see that session. This is the first time I've heard of this. Now, the idea of multiple people sharing the same code base, taking responsibility for it, is one of the principal practices of extreme programming, one of the first things that Kent defined, collective code ownership. I think you're going to get into some very interesting team dynamics if you have multiple people sharing the same image at the same time. That's something I would really need to think about, who I would want to have sharing that image with me. Pair programming is one thing, but having 6 to 8 people on it, I'd be interested in seeing if there are any slides or materials of that talk. I can't say anything more about it now, outside of the fact that, wow, that could be cool. It could be a disaster. Okay. 2 mics.
another. Okay, it works better now, at least for the locals. Anyway, so the retrospective of a project. Yes, about the spirits of the team. How they start by analyzing how the team feels. I mean, how team members feels about the project, about each other, and before going on with what works, before going on with analyzing the process, there is the human relationship, and thinking of the team live more than over more than a single project. So,
okay, one thing that's important to think about.
Yeah, Steph asked me to tell you an experience we had with Luc at an Agile conference, which was XP Days for France, and we had we played a role game. We were like actors of Christmas. For setting up Christmas, we were working for Santa Claus, and we had to analyze after Christmas the various problems, what happens, what was wrong, what was good, and take a lesson for next year. And we start first with saying, okay, are we ready? What are your comfort level about discussing the issues? And if the comfort level of people wasn't good, we stop and postpone the meeting. And then each group or subgroup of the team has to put on a few post-its, the issues they encountered or the positive point they encountered, and we had to put this on the timeline of the whole project, and then analyze this with the whole group afterwards.
Okay, this sounds like some standard retrospective techniques, and this is something you should really talk with Tim about. One piece of input I'd like to give to that is what you do in a retrospective is different whether you're in the middle of a project, whether you're at the end of the project, and if you're at the end of the project, how are things going to go on? Is this group then disbanding? Are you looking for a sense of closure? Is this group going to work together as a team on another project? What's happening there? And depending on what your goals are, where you are in the project, you're going to be doing different things. But for me, there's a basic idea behind retrospectives. And this gives me the chance to use the flip chart that I have back here and try to draw very big for you. Okay, you see that? All right. So I'll put that line through there. That's you on a ship. Think Titanic. Okay? Now, imagine you were born and you grew up in Papua New Guinea, where the sun always shines and you never see these things. So you never learned about them in school. And then when you, for some reason, you're up in the north on a ship outside of Greenland and you're watching outside and the wind's blowing and your hair is getting messed up and the flag is going in one direction and the foam on the water is going in one direction. And then all of a sudden you see this little thing up here, which you don't know what it is, and it's not obeying the laws of physics. Because while everything else is blowing in one direction, this is coming in the other direction towards you. And then you stand there and you watch this thing, and it's coming close to you, and you can, imagine Celine Dion playing in the background and things like that. This gets closer and closer until you crash and burn. Now, this is what happens to your teams when you're not doing retrospectives. Because while what all you're looking at is up here, down here, this is where the music's playing. And most of the times, what we're looking at up here, the question is that we look out is, how did we do? Or how are we doing? This part is looking at the doing part. This is our product. But in order to survive, we have to look at these 2 points here. The ones below the surface. One is the how. How did we do? our process. And the other part is the we. How did we do? And that's the people. And it's important to understand that in the most project reviews that we look at the product. If we want to survive as a team, as a company, we need to look more at these aspects. Look at the process and look at the people. But what I'm going to suggest here is really, Tim has a lot more experience in this than I do. I learned a lot of things from him. With him about this. He can give you some very good tips. Okay, anyone else? Okay.
Yeah. I'm Cedric Beller, and I was wondering if agile methodology are software only, or could they be extended to mechanical engineering? I come from this background, so this is
okay. Are agile processes just for software, or can they be used for other things? I said at the beginning of the of my talk, I've used agile for planning rock concerts, for optimizing the emergency room of a hospital, for planning my wedding. I use a variant of the Scrum method every day to plan my work. I'm not crazy. I'm not an evangelist. I'm just very pragmatic about this. And Scrum, at least, has nothing at all to do with software development, right? It doesn't tell you how to do things. It just tells you when to do what. And one thing you might take along is for your personal work. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Eisenhower Method. Anybody here ever hear the Eisenhower Method? Eisenhower Method essentially, okay, I'm going to draw this on a piece of paper and stick it up in front, and maybe you can see it. The Eisenhower Method divides things into 4 quadrants based on whether what you need to do is important and whether it's urgent. Things that are important and urgent are in quadrant A. Things that are important but not urgent, quadrant B. Things that are urgent but it's not important that you do it are in C. Things that are neither important or urgent in quadrant D. The way you deal with this is that anything is in quadrant A that's important and that's urgent, you do that. You do that as soon as possible. Anything that's important but not urgent that it has to be done right now, that's stuff you plan. And you can plan this using Scrum. Okay, so you don't use Scrum on everything. You just use it on the part that's important that you have to do it, but it's not urgent that it has to be done now. It needs to be done sometime, so you plan your work to do that. Anything that's urgent but it's not important that you do, you delegate, give to someone else to do if possible, and the stuff that's neither important nor urgent, you forget it. Just leave it, because either it'll vanish or it will become either important, urgent, or both. And by sorting out the things that are important to do and the things that you need to plan, your work for any specific day would be to do all the things from A, whatever from you need to do from B that needs to be done on that day, and catching up on anything that is you need to delegate. And that's a simple way of using Scrum just in your personal life. That's what I use to manage my business. And I have a list of things to do today. Some of them are A, some of them have been planned. I do my planning session once a week on the weekend to say what needs to be done this week. And then I work through that. And anything that's done, anything that's urgent, I don't need to do it. Anything in C, that's something I pass. Good, I'm lucky I pass it on to my secretary. But if you look around, you can always find people who are willing to help you to do work. Maybe you need to help them sometime. Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, speaking of A, we've got coffee coming up now, which is urgent, I would imagine. So if we a round of applause for Joseph. Lots to think about here.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank City Lab and ESUG for taking up the challenge of doing a virtual conference. I was really sad that I couldn't come to Barcelona, and I'm really happy it worked out this way, and I'm really happy that Skype didn't crash during this talk. Have a nice conference, and I hope to see you next year in live and in person. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joseph. So, coffee. And we'll be back at 10:30.